You're listening to the She Lift Project podcast, a show dedicated to helping women achieve higher levels of success in the workplace. No matter where you are in your career, we want to help you grow. Now here's your host, Cynthia Kirkpatrick, a CPA, CFP, and Senior Financial Advisor at Moneta Group.
Welcome to another episode of the She Lift Project podcast. I'm Cynthia Kirkpatrick, and thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited that we dress the same. Shalia Ford is here with us. Mental stream, totally. Didn't even plan this, but it was meant to be. Shalia is going to share so much wisdom about life in general, but potentially some of the things you're doing with women and youth leadership. Shalia and I met, and I'll let you speak in a second, but quick intro. We met through Focus St. Louis Women in Leadership.
Yes.
She was leading the program with 29 other women or 28 other women and myself, and guiding us for several months on diving deep into all sorts of things to get us to think about our life, our journey, our path, etc., which will be fun to then share your journey, path, life, etc., and how you help others today. So, director of programs, leadership programs at Focus St. Louis, currently a long background of leadership programs, education. So I feel like leadership's important, but really probably your expertise is helping people grow and educate.
Yes, I would agree with that. My own personal tagline is that I equip individuals to lead where they live, learn, work, play, and worship. So that's everyone, everywhere, but it's really about developing them to be their best selves. And we do that in a lot of different ways. And you've been able to experience it in one way through the Women in Leadership program at Focus St. Louis.
Which most women, that was cohort 79. We just graduated at the end of May.
Yes.
So you'll be moving on to AD soon. But most women, it was funny. I had heard about the program, thought a lot about it, but I always thought, okay, next year or whatever it might be. But as the topic came up, more and more women said, I did that back then. I did this already. I met so-and-so through that. And it was life-changing, which I do believe many of us who went through the program this last time feel the same way. So much so that people are moving cities, changing jobs, careers, that. So life-changing.
Life-changing. Transformation is the word that I will use. And I notice you're wearing your butterfly today. I have a little butterfly on my necklace. But for me, this process is really about helping women, once they've chosen to take this journey with us, to really understand that this is part of their growth and development. And so the butterfly to me is representative of she's opened her wings, but first she has to, the caterpillar goes into this chrysalis, which is a protected stage of development. And I think that what I'm able to do in the program is to create the brave space that women need to be vulnerable, to do the internal work that has to happen, to have, great and deep, thoughtful, reflective conversations, to bring in a lot of other great women. But at the end of it, that she's breaking out of that chrysalis and she's got her wings. And so for me, that's what that butterfly represents. And that's what I mean by transformation. Yes, it is life-changing, but it is a transformation that happens for each woman on an individual basis. But you're going through this process collectively with other women so that you don't feel so alone.
Well, I hadn't really thought about it then. We meet twice a month, 9 to 4, one a Saturday, one during the work. And you really do. You leave your families or your home, whatever it might be, and you come to this new business, new place, and you're all together going through it all day long together. And you leave and you're back into life. So that time there, diving into yourself and with others and learning from them and listening to them and growing with them is that formation and going internal so that you can come out and spread your wings.
Yes.
Well, and I brought this with me too.
Yes.
Because it's up on my desk here in the office, my normal job. And every time we start our day, we read this and we all receive this, our last day together. But it's and we'll get more into everything you're doing now and how you got here. I think this is helpful because we're starting, so we should start how we started.
Should start.
And everyone who's listening to this, I think, as they listen today and grow inside themselves, this is important. You probably know it by memory.
Kind of
a little bit. I do not. But maybe we should even do it together.
Let's do it
because
together.
That's how we're supposed to do it.
Exactly.
And support each other. So, okay, you start it. You always start.
I always start it. And everyone, I do a countdown just so that we're on it together. So 1, 2, 3. It's my time to invest in me. It's my time to release what no longer serves me. It's my time to embrace new possibilities. It's my time to be unapologetically me. It's my time to level up and lead. It's my time to thrive.
Powerful.
It is very powerful. And let me tell you, the woman that initially introduced a different version, but I've modified it over time. And specifically, when I became the director of Will, I decided to pull this in as a mantra to center us. But the woman who introduced it to me was someone who became my mentor. She's someone that I met at a previous role when I lived in Minneapolis. I was just starting out my career, and this woman saw something in me from day one. And initially I was like, I don't want to talk with you. I don't want your encouragement. I don't want to form a relationship with you. I was just not in a good place.
Did you work together?
We did work together. And so through the process of working with her, getting to know her, and seeing the vision that she had for women, at that time, she started a program called Project STEP, which stood for Strive Toward Economic Progress. So it was in the days where people were trying to push women off of welfare, into work. And so she had this vision for a voluntary program to support women. And when she shared the vision, I was like, I want to help. What can I do? I'll work with their children while the women are with you. And so she had this, it's my time. The words were different. So it really is mine now in terms of owning the words and what those words mean. But it was how she started out with those women to say, it is your time to have a life change, to do something different, to consider the possibilities. And so when I became the director of Will in 2021, I thought, I want to introduce It's My Time to those women. I had been using it in various capacities and sharing it with different individuals, but I just thought, what a way to center us. So often women are concerned or in charge of many others, right? Others is what we do. We wear multiple hats. But when do we get a moment to just say, it is now my time? And so this has become our mantra. We say it all the time. Every cohort since Will 73, which was my first cohort, we've been saying it. We've been sharing it. And I want other women to share it. Yes, it's something that I modified and created, but the intent was, how do we empower and inspire women with this mantra that they can adopt? And often there's 6, different statements there, but sometimes all of them are what we need in that moment, right?
It's funny. I think one of our first times together, we talked about, we each raised our hand or said which one of these spoke to us in the moment. And so we can all get something different, what we need from that. But I remember even to the last day, and I thinking about it, almost starting to say this was a tearful moment because it was finally that permission.
Yes.
And we almost need, as women, I feel like that permission from someone else, because whatever reason, it's hard to give ourselves permission to not be doing for everyone else and to do for ourselves.
Yes.
And so simple, really not a lot of words, but so powerful and moving.
Absolutely. What I decided to do, and even though I know it and I've shared it, about 1.5 years ago, I said, how am I centering myself even more? Because in my mind, I can't lead, guide, coach, inspire other women to understand that it's their time if I'm not doing the same. And so then I made these wallpapers for my cell phone. I sent them out in a few of the groups, and I've put it up in a different way in my office at home. I have one of these famed, it's my time at my office at work. But I said, how am I embracing this in a new way? Because sometimes things can just become routine and habit. And I was like, I don't ever want this, it's my time, to become a routine or a habit. That's why I haven't memorized it, because I think if I do, I'm afraid that it will just get lost in the noise of life. But for me, it was like, what are you doing? And I'm challenging myself daily on one of these. Sometimes it's showing up unapologetically me and saying the thing that has to be said. Sometimes it's just, how am I investing in me right now? Whether that's educational growth or learning something new, taking on a new hobby, or maybe starting a new healthy habit, right? So for me, it is a living mantra that I don't want to become just kind of blasé routine where it doesn't have meaning anymore.
Well, and that's important because you've got a son.
Yes.
So you're a mom.
I am a mom.
Not all women have to be moms, but when you are a mom, you know that you have already given a piece of yourself away, and every day you're giving a piece of yourself to that person. And you're leading women,
Yes.
2 cohorts a year, and youth leadership. So you're constantly leading, guiding, giving to others. I have to imagine that's both fulfilling, but could be the energy it takes to do that would be difficult. That leadership, tell more about, what you're doing to help lead people or help them grow in their leadership, women, youth. And then eventually we'll get to how you got there and go back to something you said earlier,
Okay.
Dive deeper.
Okay. I have to be honest. I believe that the work that I'm currently doing is part of my why and part of my purpose. And I believe it is my faith, my belief in God and Jesus Christ. And it's not that I want people to necessarily believe what I believe. That's not what this is about. But I have to be my authentic self as I'm leading groups. And so for me, that's an important piece of who I am and how I show up. And so for me, this opportunity to lead and guide others as they grow and develop, whether you're a youth, whether you're a young professional, whether you're a woman, whether whoever you are, I want to encourage you, one, to just, if you're having a bad day, I want to encourage you with a kind word or a smile. When you're thinking about going on a growth journey, I want you to take time to center yourself and reflect. The internal work is necessary for you to be the best that you can be. And so for me, my philosophy is that leadership is an inside job first and foremost. When I take care of the business of the inside, which only I can do, right? Addressing the confidence issues, addressing the hurt and trauma maybe that I've experienced in leadership or from other leaders. When I think about the issues that are most important to me or the things that I value most, if I'm not clear about what those are, then how can I encourage others to do the same, or how can I really lead as effectively as I could, right? And so for me, it's about self-reflection, self-awareness, and then choosing what you will do with the result of the self-reflection. So when you said earlier that some people are, leaving this area to pursue a new opportunity, maybe they didn't have the confidence to do that before. When you think about giving away ourselves to others, yes, but to a degree, right? And so how do I decide to create the boundaries that will help me to take care of me so that I can take care of the people and or the work that I feel, individuals feel that they're called to. So it's really about stopping and slowing down enough to take a look at ourselves and then decide what pieces of that do I want to work on? Do I want to reconcile with? Do I want to heal? And then how I show up for others in my home, in community, at work. You're a much better, well-rounded leader because you've taken that time. And often we don't. We don't want to talk about the hard things. We don't want to talk about the difficult things. We want to show everyone the highlight reels, right? Like on social, all the good stuff. But we don't want to talk about the other stuff. And I think what also helps us to be effective in this role as a leader is that I want people to revisit the hard stuff. I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist, but I am a guide. And I've done my own internal work. And so I think that I have compassion and empathy in a way that allows people to be vulnerable, to remove their mask, and to really decide what it is they want. You've experienced that in Women in Leadership to your own degree. And while the youth program that I work with at Focus is a little bit different in nature, they still get me. And so I'm still challenging young people. What do you want? What do you care about? What do you just see in the world that, you're so passionate about, you're running to it, or it's causing so much pain to you or others that you're like, this can't happen, this can't be, and exposing them to leaders and the challenges and the opportunities in our region so that they can facilitate the hard conversations, so that they can learn how to work with other people, so that they can accept different views or perspectives that might not be the same as their own, but that I can sit and have a conversation and listen. To thinking about, in the youth program, we have a research action project. And so they actually pick a project to work on with their peers while they're in the 9-month program to address something or to investigate it a little more and then make up recommendations or come up with recommendations. And so it's a little bit of a different spin than what the experience in Women in Leadership is. But for me, as the facilitator of both of those programs, the difference helps me want to keep it fresh, want to keep it new, and still want to grow and develop leaders, but meeting each group where they are to take them to that next place.
But I'm glad you said that, we throw that acronym around, but yes, that's the Women in Leadership program. And my experience having been through that, everything you just said is so true, that really the program forces you inside to say, who are you? What do you want? Who do you want to become? And what is holding you back? And what skills and things do you need to develop to get there? And I'm sure both from a just what you're teaching, training, what we're all trying to learn, we'll get back to, but your journey has been one through, as you say, go back internal and think about what's been holding us back or what's the trauma that we face to propel beyond that. You grew up a little bit that I researched. I like more of it to come out here so I don't lead too many questions. Okay. But, in an environment that maybe was challenging, some may think, and it's all relative, but overcame, and now you're this community leader spreading knowledge, love, community support. Where did it start? I can't imagine you thought way back when, I'm going to be a leader and train people.
I couldn't have answered that question back when I was a child, but when I think about different points in my life that were defining moments for me, it was all there. That's why it's important to take time to reflect, because I believe that if we mine our own data, the data from our life, our experiences, then there's things that are there that tell us or point us into the direction. So here's what I mean. So yes, you're right. And I appreciate that you were like, I'm going to be cautious about how much of her story I share. My story is one of trauma to triumph, right? And so as a child, I lived in an unhealthy and unsafe home environment. I was abused as a child. And for many years, that abuse went unnoticed by those in my household, those that knew me in community. And I think that there was a piece that I didn't want people to know because I was afraid. I was ashamed. I felt guilty even though it wasn't my fault. But as a child, you don't know what to do with those emotions. So my response was, education is my way out. So I excelled in grade school and high school. And I knew that in order to be able to be economically self-sufficient and independent, that education was my pathway. So I tried to be the best student. I also took on that perfectionist tendency because I wanted people to think that I was good and that I was lovable. And so if I was perfect and if I was an A, maybe B student, like some things became unacceptable. Lower than a certain grade was like unacceptable because I wanted to be good. I wanted to be perfect. I wanted to prove that although the things that people couldn't see that were happening to me, but that I was still good enough and that I could aspire to do more than, you know, what the trajectory of my mom was even, right? And so for me, it was out of that formed in me this desire to lead, this desire to give back. At the age of 16, I left home. So I'm in high school. I'm entering my junior year, but because it was so unsafe and unhealthy, and it came really to a point where I had to choose me, and I chose me. I asked for help. A lot of things happened on that particular day. I remember it so vividly in my mind. But even when I asked for help and help was there, then the story started changing and people started wanting to let's handle this differently. Let's keep this in the family. And I'm like, I have to choose me now again and walk away. And I walked away that day. And as a result of that choice, it put me on a path of healing. It put me on a path of there's hope for a future. It put me on the path of understanding the internal work that has to happen when you've been living in trauma.
And so many people stay in, that's what we can tell, an awful situation.
Yes.
What other people's awful situations are, they often choose to stay with what they know versus even adults move to the unknown for fear of
Right.
what's worse. So you at 16 to be able to make that choice, huge. And I think that if certain instances or situations that kind of led up to that decision wouldn't have happened, I probably would have stayed and just, as long as you don't hurt me anymore and harm me anymore, no one has to know, I'll be fine, we'll continue on. But there was some things that begun to happen where it took me to kind of like the fork in the road. Either you're going to stay this way and this is what your life will be, or you will choose to go the path unknown and whatever happens will happen. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm already living in hell. The other choice can't be any worse, any bad, any more hellish than where I already am. So I chose me thinking, I don't know what's on the other side of this choice, but it has to be better. It has to be different, right? And it was. But I will tell you, even in the midst of that choice and the years that followed, there was a lot of rocky roads and ups and downs and emotions that I felt, and really trying to understand more about myself, but just how do I show up in the world and reclaim my power back? How do I make choices and decisions not based on fear or that the unknown is there? I'm like, I did it once, like, right? Like this, now I'm building this muscle of courage and confidence that I don't have to know all of the answers. And why ideally I want to be in control of all of the things, because my life, there was so much that was out of my control. How do I live this life? And one of the ways that I was able to do that, it's only by God's grace, was my faith. I thought, if God will see me through this and will walk with me, I will be okay. And I am okay. You're more than okay. You're helping so many of us to work through our journeys. Do you think 16-year-old young, although probably mature beyond your years at that point, Shalia would have anticipated Shalia today?
No, at the time I couldn't see her. because there was just so much hurt. There was just so much masking, right? Like I shared, like I met this woman who shared the "it's my time" and was embracing me. And because of my hurt and because of the walls that I built up, I couldn't even receive her goodness. I couldn't receive her love. I couldn't receive her genuine care because that's not what I experienced. And that's not what I knew. So it took time for the healing process and for me to shed the layers of, kind of the things that happened in my life to say it's okay. And there are good people in the world, right? And from that, I thought, I don't want another girl or woman to experience what I experienced and think that one, she's alone, and that two, she doesn't have a choice. While I didn't choose the abuse, I did choose how I would respond and take responsibility for myself. And to me, that was about me taking ownership and power of the pieces that were mine, right? And so my faith and making those choices and daily doing the work is what has inspired me to want to help other women and girls in particular, but everyone. I mean, I want to develop and train all folks to be their best, right? But women and girls are my audience because it was as a child, as a girl, that I started experiencing these things. It wasn't until I became an adult that I was able to heal and grow and shed. And it's a journey, right? And so for me, it's like I want women and girls to know that whatever's happened to you doesn't have to define you. I want women and girls to know that there are safe and brave spaces in the world. And for me in particular, it was other women who became my community of support. And it is in community that growth, healing, joy can happen. And so I am so intentional about creating that space with women in leadership and any other groups of women that I'm involved with or volunteer with. Like that is a cornerstone of how I show up and what I try to create with intention for them.
I love that part about women, and I've written too many notes already, which I knew I would. And I want to come back to that, but I thought what was interesting that you said about this woman who wanted to help, saw your skills and your light, yet you weren't in a position, you had built up so many walls to strengthen yourself, you weren't in a position to let her or maybe anybody else in with the light to help.
Mm-hmm. From my own personal experience, I think in not wanting to be harmed by others, I wore masks so that you wouldn't really see who I was. I let you see who I wanted you to see. I built up walls to not let people so close. And I thought that I was, and in a way I did, but I thought I was protecting myself, right? I was like, if nobody else is going to do it, this is what I need to do. And that worked until it didn't work, right? And so I think it's important for people to not, not feel bad about what they needed to do to survive. Because if I wouldn't have done those things, I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet you and even lead women in leadership, right? So that is part of my story, part of my journey, and I'm not ashamed of it. I'm grateful to God that I'm here and that I've overcome so much, and I'm still a work in progress, right? But as a result of that, I am able to speak truth. I'm able to sit with people and hear the hard stories. I'm able to encourage, right? And so I'm like, my journey is my journey, and part of it was all for a reason. Now, do I want anybody else to necessarily go through what I went through? Absolutely not. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. However, because of my faith and trust in God, I know that He is using this for my good and for His glory.
It's when you were talking about that, I was just talking about to my 12-year-old on Saturday, I think, about this, how in my growing up years, there was some tormenting done that looking back now, I didn't even realize it. I thought, oh, I'm good. I'm successful. Got a great marriage, 3 kids, great career. I'm successful. I have no past trauma. I don't remember it. I've moved on. But looking at that for probably decades, really, I had put up that wall of protection because that was safer, I thought, better, I thought, to protect versus, and I don't know if it's Maya Angelou or I don't know who said it, but, and I'm sure a million people have said it in some different way, when you put up that wall, when you block out the pain and the hurt, you also block out everything else, love,
the light, the
right.
joy. If you're not careful, and we don't know it until we're there, right? If you're not careful, the wall that you built to protect becomes the prison that keeps you stuck. And I did not want to be stuck, right? Hence this release what no longer serves you. Be unapologetically me, meaning I can take the good, the bad, and the ugly of my story, of my journey, and still show up in my power and in my truth, right? Like, so the words are not just words, but they have that deeper meaning behind them. And for each of us, we have to grab onto that piece to say, okay, sometimes we're keeping the story because we're protecting our loved ones, our children, right? My son he knows a little bit about the story, but he doesn't know the details. I don't talk about the details. I'm like, that's my stuff, right? But I want him to understand that everybody has a choice in life. And it doesn't have to be to the hard trauma, the abusive side. But you have a choice in your friend group. You have a choice in how you show up and treat people with kindness and love, I hope, right? Like, that's what I want him to be, a good human. You have choices around the decisions you make and the consequences, good and sometimes bad, that come with those choices, and owning that and being responsible, right? So there's a lot of different ways that lessons can be learned. It doesn't always have to be the hard, very traumatic things, but you're right. If we're not careful, the walls that we created to protect us will keep us there.
Well, the choice, right? So often we're in a difficult situation. We feel helpless. We feel choiceless. But really, there are choices. Do I stay? Do I leave? Is there some other form on that spectrum that I do have a choice? So you're not powerless.
Right.
In finding your path and moving beyond. And as you said there, which I think is important, you choose your heart, choose your joy, choose your whatever it is, but staying inside the prison you built, that's going to be hard. And breaking free and trying things you've never tried before, that will be hard. Which heart are you going with?
Exactly. And once you do the first hard thing, doesn't mean that every other hard thing will be easy. It just means that now you have some experience to say, I did that, whatever that is, right, for you. And I encourage individuals in their growth and development process for the baby steps. I mean, sometimes you just take a leap of faith and boom. Like, my choice to leave at 16 was like, I don't know what's on the other side of this, but I know it has to be better than where I am. But sometimes it's just the small thing, whatever that is for the individual, to step out of their comfort zone or step out into the unknown and just try it. And then you go, oh, what's the worst that could happen? Most often, not a lot. We tend to think about what's the worst, but then it's like, but what's the best that could happen? Oh, I might meet a new friend. I might pick up a new skill. I might, experience joy that I didn't know that was for me. Well, all of that is on the other side of a choice, right? So it is about making the decision to do the hard thing and then keep doing the hard things.
As you said, what have you worked up in your head that this, I think it's a Katie Byron or whoever talks about, how can you really know that's what's going to happen? Can you really know that for sure?
Right.
What story have you put in your head? So if you're okay with it, I would love to ask, how 16, you walk away, leave, how'd you get through? Like, what'd you do? Where'd you go? How'd you, that would stop so many people from progression and achievement.
Well, I had great support So I had a friend, his mom was supportive. She introduced me to someone else that let me stay with them for a couple of days until I could kind of sort things out. From there was just other family members or women or close friends who provided a home, right? Provided a place for me to be, provided stability when things were not stable, in the sense of just, I have somewhere to go, right? I know where I'm going tonight, right? I'm not out on the street. Providing examples of what healthy relationships could be for me, loving me through times when I felt like I was totally unlovable because of what had happened in the situation that I found myself in, right? But it was women who modeled what it could be. There was a time where I was in therapy. I'm like, I got to talk to somebody about this. This is like, what has happened, what is happening and what has happened is not normal, right? And how do I talk about what it means to live in a functional family, right? And just a lot of different things. But again, faith too. So a lot of the women that surrounded me were women of faith. So they were speaking life into me. They were encouraging me. They were lifting me up and praying for me, right? And so for me, it was that, having people show up for me, right? And it was also me also deciding, there was just certain people or individuals that I'm like, I can't be in relationship, or I have to keep a distance until I'm in a place where I can be stronger, or that, if I choose forgiveness and reconciliation with them, right? There's still a few people that I'm like, there's no turning back. But then there were others that I'm like, the relationship is worth restoring. And forgiveness is necessary and required based on my faith practice. So again, it's all about a choice. But for me, there were people that were there. So I wasn't on my own. I wasn't alone. People modeled love and support. And that helped me get through the first several rocky years of me leaving.
Well, whether it's everyone should hear this, but I think especially women, asking for and getting that help and that support, and that's okay, and it's good if you're going to grow past where you are. Often it comes with health and support, and in addition to that, talking about or thinking of all those people that are closest to you. So who do you surround yourself in that in your life, whether it's you're young and you have to, or you break free from that, or you're older and you get to choose. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's okay if the season of your life changes and there are people that are no longer consistently in it, whether your paths have outgrown each other or you come back later in life and rebuild, but being very cognizant of the people, the vibe, the energy you have around you, and who you're seeing as an example of what you could become.
That is so important. I love that you said seasons. I talk about life in seasons often. And so that's an important piece, understanding the season of life you're in and what you need in that season, because it does change. And every time a season changes, you need something different, because there's a different you that you're becoming in that season. It is also important who you surround yourself with, and whether family, friends, acquaintances, colleagues, whomever. For me, it became so important that they weren't critical and negative. And so negativity, I don't have a tolerance for. And while I'm not just like everything is roses, no, they're not. My life experience has showed me that everything is not rosy. However, you can't bring the negativity. I won't last long in those environments. It's actually very draining to me. And what I also learned is some people are used to chaos and drama, so they consistently create it because that's what their norm is. And I'm like, my norm is not that anymore. And so I choose to be in environments that are uplifting and positive. And while I'm not saying that conflict can't happen, because we're humans, but some people just bring conflict. And I'm like, I don't do that. And so I'm mindful of my space. I'm mindful of the energy. I'm mindful of people. Some people I gravitate to, and some people I'm like, nope, mm-mm. And sometimes that's hard because sometimes those people are your family members. So I minimize that time and space. At least I did when I was living in a state much closer to everyone. Now I'm kind of, very small family unit here, lots of friends who are like family, but I chose those individuals, right?
And that's difficult to realize, come to grips with, because of just how you're raised or whatever it might be, how important is your family, no matter what, blood, the bond that cannot be broken. However, blood, family, healthy relationship, as I've gotten older, I've started to learn I shouldn't feel guilty if there's something there I need to either distance or shed, or just because there's that family name there doesn't mean that if it's not serving me, that I need to stay in that.
Right. That's hard.
And probably part of what you were talking about is knowing that you don't like drama, chaos. I need to stay away from the negative. A lot of what we talked about already is, who are you? Right. What do I want and need?
Right.
And I know during our time in Women in Leadership again, part of our conversation as women was talking about how do we work on recognizing the good, being grateful, focusing more on that positive side. And it was, I don't want to, different for everybody, whether it's a gratefulness journal, whether it's, getting outside and exercising, whatever it might be. But one book you had mentioned was Real Self-Care. And I ended up listening to that. And I shared it with others, recommended it. And it too goes into, who are you internally and what do you want? Which, that seems so basic. Why is it so hard?
I think it's so hard because often, and not all women, so I'm making a very general statement, but we are so focused on others and we're socialized to take care of everyone else's needs first and foremost. And like maybe we get some crumbs at the end of the day, but it's kind of like we wake up every day and most of us are doing, going, switching hats, mom, employer, employee, whatever it is, right? We're wife, all of that. And we don't have time to stop and think about who we are. And it's easy to kind of lose ourselves in that. And then you don't know who you are because you're listening to all the noise and what everyone else says. Your kid needs you to be their mom and to show up and like do field trips and like bake stuff or whatever, right? Like there's people who need you. And so we tend to fulfill the needs of others before we fulfill the needs of ourselves. And in that we lose what it is we want or even who we are. Well, who am I if I'm not so-and-so's mom? Who am I if I'm not so-and-so's wife or partner? Who am I, and you know this, if I don't have that title anymore? In our very first segment or session, I said, introduce yourself without your title. And for some people, that was hard. Like, what? You just stripped away everything that was going to be my 1-minute presentation of myself. And I do that intentionally because titles are awesome. The roles that you play are awesome. But at the core of you have to know who you are. And when all of that is taken away or goes away, or you choose to do something different, be someone else, what happens when you lose a child and you're no longer a mother? Or does that mean you're not a mother? Right? Think about and that's the most morbid, tragic way to think about it. But when you are no longer the fill in the blank title, and if everything that you've done has been poured into maintaining and keeping that, what happens when it goes away by force or choice? Are you then less than a woman, a human because of that? No. And I've had that experience too where, the title and the this and the travel and all the things. And then what happens when that goes away? For a little while, I lost myself. because I was playing the role so well that I forgot who Shayla was.
And I think for women, and I, not being a man, maybe my husband will correct me after this, I think there's an extra layer of hard in that because of who we're raised from an early age to have dresses and bows and our hair are beautiful. And, there's less magazines per se, but all of the photoshopping of what a woman should look like, what females should be, what should they look like, not too athletic, not too we're being inundated all the time with what we should be from a external.
Right.
That I think that's where we find our who are we as the external, what we've accomplished versus that internal. It seems so simple, but why is it so hard?
That's the $1 million question that I don't have all of the answer to, but I think it is part of the answer is taking time for yourself, taking time to get to know who you are again, deciding to pause and reflect. That self-awareness piece I think is so important. I think it's through the intention of that you get to reclaim the pieces that maybe you've lost or forgotten, or the things that you've settled for because it's just easier, or I won't have the support. One of the sessions early on in the program, we talk about our fears, and a lot of the things that come up for women are, I'm alone, I can't do it, I won't be supported, what'll happen if my family members or loved ones know that I have these desires or these goals or these dreams, like all of those things. But those are the fears of the unknown, the fear of success, the fear of failure, all the things, right? And so it's important for us to remember that there is at our very core, an essence of who we are. And the titles and the roles are layers to that, but they don't totally define who we are.
And I think, in my journey, what I found and what you said there is pause, slow down, take time to reflect, real meaningful time to reflect, and then sit back and think, when I'm at my happiest, what am I doing? What am I enjoying? Is it, I know for me, creative artwork, probably not my jive. Puzzles and putting what I do for a living, numbers and puzzles and things together, I love that. So then you can start to answer and map out, well, if there's a career in making videos, I'm going to be unhappy. That's not who I am. But if it's a career in what I do for a living, then I am going to be happy. So sitting back and thinking through your life, what were those moments you were really happy? What were you doing, and what's underneath that? I would imagine for you, thinking back, it's probably educating, learning, growing, and sharing that learning and growing, educating in some form or fashion.
Yes.
Whereas someone else may say, I'm good with that right now. I want a status quo or whatever it might be.
Right.
I want to push myself in that way, and finding those layers.
I love how you said learning, teaching, growing. Yes. And the way that I've been able to distill it down very recently in a whole nother way of part of my why is that I want to inspire hope. I want to facilitate healing, and I want to witness women and girls become whole, well, and walk in their purpose, right? So that's how when I think about what I do is equip leaders, the way that I do that is hope and encouragement, love, self-love. When I think about healing, although I'm not a social worker or a therapist, because I've done my own internal work, there's some experience there that has made me empathetic and compassionate and able to listen and really meet people where they are. And so sometimes me asking, I never think they're tough questions, but often people look at me and are like, that's so hard, Shayla, why did you ask me that? And I'm like, oh, okay. But sometimes the reflective piece is what facilitates the healing for individuals, or being in a brave space where you're like, I can share the thing that I didn't think I could say out loud to another group of individuals, but you're able to, right? And then for me, it is witnessing what happens when the woman emerges from the chrysalis and has her butterfly wings, and she's soaring high in whatever thing that she wants. That to me, the important piece is that it's not about that I'm creating a woman who has this certain I don't know, like profile as much as it's the woman who is finding her voice and has a vision for her life because she knows who she is and she knows what she wants and that she's willing to pursue it. That looks so different for all of us. And I get to be a part of helping women to notice that about themselves. And that's pretty exciting for me. So that's what excites me. I'm like, oh, if I could do this every day, all day, of course, with taking care of myself, I would do it. No questions asked.
And I think that's a couple of things. One, for women to learn, there is no one size fits all for us.
Right.
That it's beautiful and probably more fulfilling for you to actually be you, however you end up. And it's going to be different from others. Right. And that's okay. It's beautiful. Like, we don't all want the butterfly wings with the same colors and everything. And then the other thing, it was interesting to me, well, maybe not just our cohort, but along the way, right? You hear, you're told, sometimes you see and feel it, that women aren't as supportive of women. Mm-hmm. And it was a little surprising to me in our group towards the end. A younger woman had shared that she was very afraid to come into this cohort, especially with a lot of us being older, and how often had she, or very little had she seen where a group of women can come together and support each other in differences. And I feel like maybe there's a myth that built that negative versus the reality. But, do you see is it hard for women to come together and support? Is that an old age thing? And how do we build that? I mean, you had mentioned the woman wanting to help you, and I'm going to take a leap here and say so long ago. It wasn't last year.
It wasn't last year.
So there's women out there wanting to help women.
Yes.
Right? Right. Can we get rid of this myth? Hopefully it's a myth that we don't want to help each other.
I hope that it's a myth, but I think that when you have been hurt or harmed by another woman, then that becomes the story and the narrative that shapes how you see other women, right? And so the woman that I mentioned that at first, I was like, oh, no. She became, over time, one of my strongest allies, advocates, and mentors. Still is a mentor to this day. And I met her, when I was in my early 20s. I'm not that age anymore. So we've had like 20, 30 plus years in this relationship. And it started with her mentoring me. But I think over time and over seasons and over life, it's become a very mutual two-way relationship in terms of how she's mentored me or how I can encourage her. And that's beautiful. But again, I recognize that at first I wasn't ready for that. And I had to heal from my own experiences that weren't positive with other women. So I think if we've been hurt by other women, it's hard to overcome that. But because I've had an experience where at my lowest, it was women who supported me and loved me and modeled for me, like I shared earlier, I know that it's possible. And so I'm so intentional about creating space where we're not competing, when we're not comparing, but we're celebrating one another, and that we're creating and holding that brave, safe space for each other and for ourselves. And so I'm intentional. So I'm not discounting that it's out there, because it is out there. However, there is a new, different possible way to build community and sisterhood with other women who genuinely care about themselves and each other.
And it sounds like if you're like the mentor and you see someone you believe in, you want to help, you want to work with, if there is some resistance, there may be history there. Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Give them time, but don't give up.
Right. You can continue to nurture and foster that relationship by just showing up, being consistent, encouraging them, checking in on them, or offering to support them if they need support. until they get to that place where they feel comfortable or they feel that trust. So sometimes it's a loss of trust. And so once trust is built and established and they know, oh, you're serious, or you're for real, or I can trust you, then the relationship can take on a different path. I will admit that it's not for everyone, right? But people have shared with me time and time again, it's easy to talk to you. And I'm like, I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to encourage you. If nothing else, I want you to just be encouraged. And then if you share more and I can respond to that or offer some feedback or share a piece of my story with you, then I think it eases. People are able to let their guard down. And then it's like, oh, okay, this person is for my good, not for my harm.
In a world where we talked about social media constantly comparing, judging, that's a hard thing not to do, I think, when we've been ingrained. But judging can be so hurtful to you and to others. How do you get out of that judging mode?
It is an intentional decision that each individual has to make. And if you know that that's your pitfall or the place where you have a gap where there's an opportunity for learning, then you have to choose to say, I don't want to be that person, or I don't want to receive that, and therefore I'm not going to give that out. And so for us in particular, I think about women in leadership, one of the first things we do is we ask, what do you need to have deep, real conversations? And every single time that I've asked that question of a cohort, regardless of which cohort it is, non-judgmental space, no judgment is what I hear consistently. So then that becomes part of our agreement and community to one another. And we hold each other accountable for that. Right. And so it's not because I said we had to do it. It's because we decided together that what we need is X, Y, Z. And when that shows up, well, then what does that look like? I don't think I did it with your group, but in other cohorts, sometimes I say, okay, well, so what does a non-judgmental or judgment-free zone look like, right? So how would we know that we're experiencing it? And then I get people to say the things out loud, right? And then it's like, okay, those are the things that we don't want to do. And if we do those things, right? We get off, we forget, then how do we gently, with grace, call people back in and say, when you said X, Y, Z, I felt as though you were judging, so there has to be a process to get yourself out of that if you find yourself in that situation. But it is a very intentional choice. And like I said, I'm a work in progress. And because of all of the work that I've done, that one's not a hard one for me. But there's others that are hard for me. But that one's not a hard one because I'm like, I don't want to be judged. I don't want to feel guilty or shamed for my choices or for my decisions or for me just being who I am. Because when I accept me, like I said earlier, the good, the bad, the ugly, what people say or think about me is not top of mind. What I think about me is important. The people that are close to me that I know love me and care for me, what they think is important. And I don't want them judging me, nor do I want to judge them. And so how would I want how would I want people to experience me, and how would I want to experience others? I'm mindful of that often.
That boomerang, what you put out in the world.
Yes,
it
does come back. You do reap what you sow. And
so focus on what you want, give that. What you don't want, don't put that out there.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So you've become a leader in your own right through your experience at NAACP, YWCA, Focus St. Louis. You teach and grow with a lot of leaders too. What are some of on your path to leadership and success, what are some of the obstacles along the way or successes that you've really learned from that you would want to share with others or want to share with young Shalia?
Well, one piece that stands out, that's why I kind of chuckled. I'm like, The success barometer continues to move if you allow it to be determined by others, right? So what success looks like for me or someone else is totally based on like who I am, what I aspire to do or to be. But more importantly, a few years ago, I kind of shifted from like the word of success to the word significance. And in my mind, what that is really about is success is all focused on you, me, the external, the things that others can see, right? The car, the house, the clothes, the title, the money, external. And that's great. I'm not saying that you shouldn't aspire to have and achieve those things. However, for me, significance is important because it is about the influence and the impact that I want to have on others. And so that begins to shift the focus from the external things to the internal service and the gifts that I can share and give in service to someone else. So what I do in terms of leadership and growth and equipping others is the way that I want to influence the world and make a significant impact. So I shift how I think about it, right? In terms of leadership, I have witnessed really great leaders, and I have witnessed some that have some work to do.
Very well put.
And we can learn from both, right? And so for me, I have seen some things or experienced the way certain people have led that have been hurtful and harmful. And I've chosen, I don't want to be that leader. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to do that to others, right? So I've learned from the not so good examples. And then I've learned from those that are prime examples. So the mentor that I mentioned earlier, who at first was like, I'm a little standoffish. How she influenced and used her leadership was through encouragement and through like meeting me where I was and listening. Listening is an important leadership characteristic. Being able to build trust through authenticity or doing what you say is important as a leader. Leaders understand their values, and while there are many things that people can value, one of the things that I value and appreciate in leaders is integrity and honesty, right? So even my own journey there was a time where I hid like my true self in my life because I was ashamed of it and it was hurtful. But when I was able to heal and embrace that, I'm like, I want to show up in truth, even if it's not so great, right? Like integrity is important. And it's not just the thing that I do when others are watching. It is the choices that I make when no one but God and myself know, but I'm still going to choose to do what's right because it's right. It's important to me that people are treated justly and fairly. And so if you notice even the work that I've done previously, working with the NAACP, about civil rights and justice and social justice, working with the YWCA Metro St. Louis was about empowering women and ending racism, right? Like, so there's this piece of me that says we have to be just, right? And equity is important. What does it look like to show up or create spaces where people feel like they're included and they belong? To me, that's a part of leadership. The final piece that I'll say, because I could talk on leadership, because I love leadership, like all the books in my house are mostly on leadership and personal growth and development. The other piece is just this vulnerability and being able to share with individuals in a moment what is on your heart, what is on your mind. And even if you don't know something, but just being able to say, I don't know. What do you think? Or I don't know. Let's find the answer together. I think that shows a level of vulnerability in leadership where people could trust you and know that you don't have all the answers, nor do they, and that you're willing to work with people and meet them where they are, because you've shared a piece of yourself and you want them to meet and accept you where you are. And I think those are some of the characteristics of a good leader and the way that I hope people experience my leadership.
You mentioned book lots of books on leadership and growth and development. Putting you on the spot here. You know where
Oh
I'm
my
going
gosh.
with this. What are some of your favorites?
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Or do we get a list from you later? And I'm probably
I should give you a list later, right? Because there's a few, but a couple that stand out right now. And while they're not necessarily titled as leadership, the Purpose Path, and I've shared that with the Women in Leadership group, is one by Dr. Nicholas Pierce, I believe is his name. It's really about you doing that self-discovery work, that internal leadership work, so that you can be the best leader, right, in the world. And so while the focus is about 5 different questions asking you, like, who are you? Are you running the right race? Are you running the race well? Those are still leadership questions in my mind, right? And so while it might not be dubbed leadership, this purpose is a piece of leadership. I have a new book that I haven't finished reading yet. I think it's called The Sixth Level, and it's about women in leadership and kind of looking at our leadership differently. So I'm intrigued by that. And right now I have to send you like the other thing. And so here's the other thing to know. It doesn't have to be listed under leadership for me to pull the leadership qualities or lessons from it. There's just a lot. So I'll send you a short list to get folks started if they're interested in reading or listening to, podcasts or listening to the audiobooks. But there's just a lot of things that I think in terms of stories, ways of thinking or being that can help us think about ways that we can lead. One more that it has become one of my favorites, and I had an opportunity last year to meet the author, is called The Spare Room, and the author is Emily Chang. I was able to meet her at a Rooted Sisters breakfast. She was the keynote, but I had been on a Zoom call with the same group at an earlier time, and she talked about her book, and I got the book and I couldn't set it down because it just talked about, in a different kind of way, like your purpose and your why. And so for me, again, that's about leadership. She talks about when you notice the gifts that you have internally, the things that you can offer to the world, what is the offense that your offer intersects with? And I'm like, to me, that's brilliant because, again, that's about that internal work. It is about that self-reflection. And for me, I could pick out, well, why do I do what I do now? Because I have now these skills, these gifts, these talents that meet a different kind of offense. And while it might not be solving hunger or solving crime or all of those things, what I am able to do is help develop the leaders who then can pinpoint, I want to solve for X, and get them to the place where they're ready to take action. And so the work that I get to do is like behind the scenes. And when we think of leader, we always think of the person that's out front, but all of us are leaders in our own right because it's about influence. And so I'm like, how do you help people see the beauty in their story and use that to influence hopefully others for the good?
You're that multiplier of
Yes.
leaders,
Yes.
quote unquote, behind the scenes. But I'm glad we circle back to the book because not only do you listen to other people's books, but you are a part of creating your own, I shouldn't say creating, reflecting, writing down, sharing your own story in a chapter you wrote titled I Choose Me.
Yes. So, and it was from another Will woman, right? Like this connection. So Jennifer Bardot is the author and publisher of, I believe, 5 anthologies currently. And I think there's 2 more in the pipeline. I was invited to write a piece of my story in the Intention anthology with 40 other women, or 39 other women. There was a total of 40 of us. And it was about, if you think about your intentions and what that means for you and how that has guided your life, how have you been intentional and what have you chose? And for me, it was like part of my personal story, choosing myself and choosing to walk away at age 16 was an intentional choice, right? And in the chapter, I just talk again about my story in a more personal way, but also the real message is when you choose yourself, you don't have to have walked in the shoes that I've walked in. You don't have to have the abuse that I've endured and overcome. But all of us every day have choices. Choose to get up and express gratitude. Choose to get up, with joy in our heart and our mind. I'm getting up today and there's some work that I get to do. Choosing saying yes to opportunities like your invitation to come on the podcast, right? But that there's this choice, whether it's a bad relationship, whether it's a toxic workplace, whether it's becoming a parent or nurturing others in community, all of those are choices. And so the ability for me to put my story in black and white was hard. I chose it, but then the process of choosing that was hard because I needed to revisit some places that I'm like, I haven't thought about that in a while. But that process of writing it was healing for me. It was scary because now it's out there in black and white. So I was cautious because I'm a mom, and I'm like, when my son reads my story or other people get wind of that I've written something, will they then begin to use that as a weapon against my son or against other people that I love? And I didn't want that to happen. And so there was this moment of, well, you've said it, you've moved on, you've healed. Why are you bringing this story back up? So there was even a little bit of fear of what would my family members who knew my story, who know my story, why are you 30 years later bringing it back up? And even with all of that, I said, this is still my story, and I own the narrative of my life. I want to share with others that your past or what's happened to you doesn't have to define you. You have to choose who you are becoming, and what is going to define you. And so for me, this was really about, although it was one chapter, it was almost the final chapter. Like, I'm really putting an end to this and saying, I really have grown. I really have healed. I really have overcome. And while there's hard parts of my story, I can do hard, right? And so for me, it was a healing process. It was a liberating experience. And I hope just to step into writing, because I do aspire to write more. But it's like, I got to just do a little bit. Okay, why not do this chapter and see where it leads me? I believe there is a book or two inside of me.
I'm sure there is. Especially, that's almost a great way to circle, close, etc. I mean, so much of this is back to the interactions you and I have had through the program. But if you connect with Shalia on LinkedIn, Facebook, anywhere else, or through Focus St. Louis, you'll see she's constantly sharing inspirational things.
Yes.
Also reposting what others are doing to share their inspiration of learning, growing, continuing to evolve as a butterfly. And there's so many ways to interact with her. And definitely, whether it's through Focus St. Louis, I'm rambling here because there's so much good stuff. But I think, well, maybe to find you, to interact with you, to soak in everything that's in there that may come out, how everyone can find you in a more succinct way than I just put it. How?
You said it right. LinkedIn is probably the place that I'm most actively posting and putting things out and can connect with others. If you're interested in one of the programs that Focus St. Louis has in our 5 program portfolio, I would say reach out, look me up on our website, or just, send me an email, look up our program pages. I am on Facebook, but very limitedly. I'm on Instagram, but very, limited. So LinkedIn is probably the place that you'll find me. The other thing I would just share is that as I wrote the chapter, I also am looking at how do I expand to do more, right? Like through my own company with my husband. And so we do have a company called GSI Consulting LLC. And we've done, him and I have dabbled a little bit in a few different things. But for me, inspiration, workshops, seminars, facilitating networking events is something that is of interest to me. So look me up if you're like looking for someone to, bring some inspiration, bring a breath of fresh air, or if you're like interested in my story, I want to do more with the chapter. And there's some things that I have created that I really haven't put out in the community for a very long time that will help women who have also been in hard places grow. That is a little bit different than what I've done with women in leadership. I've been mindful to there's some work that I do with Focus that is that work, and that's what people can expect if they come through one of our programs. But then there's another side of things that will allow me to even show up more as me, if that even makes sense, in the sense, I'll say, in the sense of really coming from a space of a woman of faith and encouraging and really helping women to grow in that spiritual self, not religion, but just kind of on that deeper inner side. And so those are the types of experiences or workshops that I want to bring to other women. So thank you for asking me where people can find me.
What I think if I were to wrap part of my journey, but our interactions over the last several months and what we talked about today, it's, hopefully helping or as a person, individual, living a life of joy. And I was going to say success earlier, but I'm changing that to significance
yes.
per our conversation, but living a pure, true life of your joy, your significance, your passion, your why really must, I hate to use those words, but it's an internal job first to
Yes.
dive deep inside, get really naked, open, vulnerable with yourself.
Yes.
To then share with the world your gifts, your power in a positive way. And wow, what that can unleash and open up for you and everyone around you.
Exactly. When we are able to, the only way to become the best version of yourself is to do the work to get to that, right? And I am constantly evolving. I am constantly growing. And I am constantly honing the things that I know that I do well. I don't focus on much of the weaknesses. I know that they're there. I acknowledge them, right? But I'm like, my strength is this. And so I need to continue to move in my power and my strength. And so in that, it results in a lot of joy and a lot of feeling fulfilled and a lot of I'm thriving rather than surviving, right? And so in order for me to help others on that journey, even if it's just for a short time, I have to continue to do the work myself in order to model what it looks like for someone else. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today, to share a little bit more about who I am and the work that I do and how I hope people experience me. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. I knew early on it was going, early on in the program, I said, will you do this with me? I knew it was going to be phenomenal. And then as we progressed through the program, I guess I like to prove myself right. Talk about those A pluses, to have that perfection. But I think the thing that I work on and still think of is this. So your book, choosing me, saying that you're significant enough to have time for yourself, be unapologetically you. Yes. These were things that I'll continue to work on, and I hope others can pull something from that and lean into becoming their true self. So thank you for being open. As we talked about, the trust, the listening, the openness, the honesty, and the vulnerability. I can't wait to share this, and I know others will be as impacted by you as I have been. So thank you.
Thank you.
This concludes another episode of the She Lift Project podcast. To hear more episodes of the show, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And to learn more about our mission of helping women reach higher levels of success, visit SheLiftProject.com and sign up to receive the latest news, ebooks, videos, and more.